All right, so hurricanes. You really can't be too prepared, can you? Even if you think, I don't live near the coast, it's fine. Better safe than sorry. And that's what we're diving deep into today, that whole Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Wind Scale,
Yeah.
the 1 to 5 ranking.
Ah, yes, a classic.
And you've got like a whole stack of sources for this one, right? Like I see official reports, meteorological
Oh, he's
analyses.
got it all. Even a bit of Wikipedia in there for good measure.
Gotta love a little Wikipedia. Okay, so the mission here with this deep dive. It's all well and good knowing Category 3, Category 5, but what do those actually mean for people on the ground? That's what we want to unpack.
You're right, it's about going beyond just those simple category numbers.
Hmm.
Because a Category 2 hitting a certain area, believe me, it could be way worse than a Category 4 somewhere else.
That's what I mean. It's not just about the wind speed. Right.
Exactly. The Saffir-Simpson scale, it's a good starting point, don't get me wrong.
Mm.
But it's not the be-all and end-all of assessing a hurricane's risk. There's more to it for sure.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. Most people, when they think Saffir-Simpson, they think wind speed. What's the problem with that?
All right, well, imagine this. A Category 2 hurricane slams into a coastal town. We're talking winds 96 to 110 miles per hour.
Wow.
Yeah. And that alone, that's enough to cause some serious damage. Trees uprooted, buildings, damaged. Power outages are almost guaranteed. Water shortages start popping up. We saw this back in '04 with Hurricane Francis.
Right.
It was a stark reminder that even a Category 2, it's not messing around.
Not a walk in the park, no.
Exactly. But here's the thing. This is where focusing just on wind speed, it kind of falls short. What about storm surge?
Right.
Right? The torrential rain that
Mhm.
comes with these things, these factors, often they don't get fully captured by the Saffir-Simpson scale, but they are huge contributors to a hurricane's impact.
So you could have, what, like a Category 2 with a massive surge, and it's doing more damage than a weaker surge on a Category 4, even though the wind speed's lower on paper.
You got it. That's why, don't just look at the category number. Think about the bigger picture. The scale's a tool, a valuable one, but just one piece of the puzzle.
Makes sense. Okay, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's make sure everyone listening is on the same page, those 5 categories. Take us through them, but let's ditch the dry wind ranges and really bring them to life, paint a picture for us.
Absolutely. So we'll start with category 1, the, shall we say, entry-level hurricane.
Right.
Winds 74 to 95 miles per hour. Now, that might not sound like much, but trust me, it's enough to topple trees, cause some damage, especially to mobile homes, power outages.
Sure.
Think of it this way. Everyday objects, they become projectiles at that wind speed. And coastal areas, they're going to start seeing some flooding, even at Category 1.
So even though it's the lowest category, it's still a serious situation.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Not just a bit of wind and rain.
Yeah.
Now, you bump it up to a Category 2. Remember those 96 to 110-mile-hour winds?
Yeah.
That's going to cause more extensive damage.
Yeah.
Buildings take a harder hit, way more trees down, and those power outages, we're talking near total power loss potentially.
Oh, wow.
Entire communities could be plunged into darkness, struggling to get by. And on top of that, you might have water shortages.
Oh,
That's a whole different ballgame.
that's intense.
Yeah. And then we go up to Category 3. That's when things get real serious.
Right.
111 to 129 mile per hour winds. And these storms, they get that label, major hurricane. It's not for nothing.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about structural damage, even to well-built homes, not just the more vulnerable structures. Flooding becomes a huge concern. Those power and water outages, forget days. We could be talking weeks or even months in some cases. Hurricane John earlier this year down in Guerrero, that was a brutal reminder of just how bad a Category 3 can get.
So life as you know it, just gone for weeks on end, potentially.
Exactly. And we're not even at the top of the scale yet. We've got Category 4. Winds are now 130 to 156 miles per hour. We're talking catastrophic damage. Hurricane Helene intensified to a Cat 4 just before it hit Florida's Big Bend. Severe damage even to those well-built homes. Most trees are going to be uprooted, snapped, you name it. And whole areas can get cut off. Impassable roads, bridges out.
It's less a weather event at that point, more like a force of nature just reshaping the landscape.
It's a great way to put it. And then we have the big one, Category 5.
The one you see in the disaster movies. The winds are just, I can't even imagine, 157 miles per hour or higher.
It's hard to wrap your head around the raw power of a Category 5. Hurricane Otis last year absolutely devastated Acapulco, made landfall as a Category 5.
Oh, wow.
And it was the only MiWi Pacific hurricane on record to make landfall at that intensity. We're talking widespread destruction. Most homes, you can't even live in them anymore. Power, water, gone for Who knows in the long?
You almost wonder if they need to make a Category 6 just for those ones.
You know, you've hit on something there. There's actually a real debate going on in the meteorological community about whether we need a Category 6.
Really?
Yeah. But before we get into that whole debate, I think a little history lesson is in order, don't you think?
Oh, I love a good origin story. Tell me everything.
Well, for starters, did you know that the Saffir-Simpson scale is a fairly recent invention? We're talking 1971.
Really? That recent?
It's true.
Well-
Created by a civil engineer named Herbert Saffir.
Okay.
And here's the kicker. He wasn't even focused on hurricanes when he started.
No.
Nope, he was studying low-cost housing.
Low-cost housing, what does that have to do with hurricanes?
It's actually pretty interesting. So he realized there wasn't a standardized way to describe how a hurricane would impact these structures. He needed a way to communicate the damage a hurricane could do to a building, and bam, the Saffir-Simpson scale was born.
Wow. Who knew that a system designed for, building damage would become the way we understand and prepare for entire hurricanes? That's amazing.
It really goes to show you, how interconnected everything is, and how even a simple tool can have a huge impact.
Okay, that feels like the perfect place to pause for a moment. We've unpacked what the Saffir-Simpson scale is all about, each category, a little history, but we're just getting started. When we come back, we're diving into that whole Category 6 debate. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so that Category 6 debate, where do we even start with that?
Well, it seems like every hurricane season, right? We get these monster storms, these absolute beasts. Makes you wonder, does the scale even go high enough?
Yeah, is 5 categories even enough anymore?
Exactly. You think about Irma back in 17, Dorian a couple years later, Patricia in 2015, that was a beast. Those are some intense hurricanes.
And those are the ones that get everyone talking about this Category 6 idea, right?
Exactly. They bring that debate right to the forefront.
So what are the arguments for and against adding a whole new level?
Well, on the one hand, you've got folks saying a Category 6 would just be a more accurate reflection. These superstorms, especially with climate change potentially making things worse, they're different.
Yeah. Makes you wonder, the scales from the 70s, right? Maybe they weren't dealing with storms that intense back then.
That's a good point. And it goes back to the core of why they even made the Saffir-Simpson scale.
Yeah.
Right? It was all about potential damage, but specifically to human-made structures.
Okay.
So the folks against the Category 6, their argument is, once you hit a certain wind speed, it's already catastrophic. What's the difference, practically speaking?
Yeah.
Another category isn't going to change how you respond.
Because it's already just devastation.
Right. If a Cat 5 can rip your house off its foundation, knowing it was technically a 6-foot marine doesn't really change things,
It's a sobering thought, but I get it. It's about being prepared, not just the number on the scale.
Absolutely. That's where we all come in, right?
Yeah.
Can't control the weather, but we can control how ready we are for it.
For sure. But this whole debate, it does make you think, could we be communicating risk better beyond just wind speed?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
We were talking earlier, storm surge, rainfall. Those are huge, and they don't neatly fit into those 5 categories.
A Cat 2 in one spot could be way worse than a 4 somewhere else, right?
Yep.
Because of those other factors.
Exactly. So how do we move beyond just the Saffir-Simpson scale and make sure people get the full picture?
Right.
Well, first, it's on each of us. Think about your own risk. Live in a hurricane-prone area. What's your evacuation route? Family, pets, what's the plan? Everyone should be asking themselves those questions.
Preparedness, preparedness, preparedness.
Couldn't agree more. But also, stay informed. Don't just tune in when there's a storm. Local weather forecasts, pay attention, but don't just look at the category. What are they saying about potential surge, rainfall, any warnings for your specific area?
Because knowledge is power, right?
Yeah,
Especially when it comes to this stuff.
you got it.
Speaking of knowledge, though, that history lesson from earlier, I'm still hung up on that. The Saffir-Simpson scale is that new. It's wild.
It really shows you how much we're always learning. Weather's not static. Our understanding shouldn't be either.
Right.
And speaking of learning, another interesting thing about the scale, remember we mentioned the deadliest hurricane in U.S. history?
Yeah.
That 1900 Galveston hurricane.
How could I forget? Category 4, right?
It was. And a chilling reminder that we don't need a Category 6 for things to be truly devastating.
Yeah.
That storm, it wrecked Galveston. Thousands dead, set the city back decades.
Really puts things in perspective.
For sure. And it's that's why understanding the scale, but also the bigger picture of hurricane risk, it's crucial. We've gotten a lot better at forecasting, preparedness, but these storms, They're a force of nature. Got to respect that.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. And we've covered so much already. The Saffir-Simpson scale, inside and out, this whole Category 6 debate, even some fascinating history.
Hopefully giving everyone something to think about.
Oh, definitely. But before we wrap up our hurricane deep dive, got a few more intriguing little details here, just for fun.
Oh, I love a good hurricane fact. Hit me.
Okay, so you mentioned Hurricane Otis 2023. Not just the only Pacific hurricane to make landfall as a Cat 5, it intensified insanely fast, right? Like record-breakingly fast.
That's right. Went from a tropical storm to Category 5 in just 24 hours. Nobody saw that coming, I'll tell you.
Wow, I can't even imagine a storm ramping up that quickly. Like a movie, except it was real life.
Right. And it shows you, got to be ready for the unexpected.
Yeah.
Especially if hurricanes are going to get even more unpredictable in the future. Who knows?
Speaking of unpredictable, bet most folks don't know this. The Saffir-Simpson scale, the National Hurricane Center didn't even use it officially until 1975.
4 whole years after it was created.
Yeah.
It's true, though. Took a while to catch on, become the standard. Goes to show, even the best tools, sometimes it takes a while for people to get on board.
And sometimes got to reevaluate those tools, right? That's like with
Bruh.
this whole Category 6 discussion.
Exactly. Always learning, always adapting. Hurricanes are no different. The key is to stay in the know, be prepared, and never stop learning.
Well said. Well, we've covered a ton of ground here today, but we are not quite done yet. Stick around. We'll be back in a moment with the final part of our Hurricane and Saffir-Simpson scale deep dive.
All right, so picking up where we left off. Hurricane Otis, going from 0 to 60, or I guess 0 to Category 5, in the blink of an eye. It's kind of scary how quickly those things can ramp up, huh?
It really is. Makes you realize we might think we've the hurricanes all figured out, but nature always has a way of keeping us on our toes.
It reminds us that even the experts, sometimes they get caught by surprise, too.
Absolutely. And it circles back to that idea, maybe our tools for understanding these storms need to evolve, too. Like that whole Category 6 debate, right?
Right. It's like, how do you balance accurately representing the power of these things with, not freaking everyone out? It's a tough one. Some people say a Category 6 would just be needlessly alarming. Others are like, no, if it reflects reality, we got to do it.
It's tricky, for sure. But I think one thing we can all agree on, no matter where you land on that debate, is that a single number can't tell you everything about a hurricane.
100%. It's about the whole picture.
Right.
Storm surge, rainfall, where you are geographically makes a huge difference. And always, always listen to your local authorities.
They're the ones with the most up-to-date info, for sure. So really, it's less about being alarmed, more about being informed and prepared.
Exactly. And the more we all understand about hurricanes, the better equipped we'll be to handle them when they do pop up.
Okay, so as we wrap up this hurricane deep dive, what are the big takeaways you want folks to remember?
All right, so number 1, the Saffir-Simpson scale. It's a helpful tool, but it's just one tool. Don't get fixated on just the category. Look at everything else too.
Right.
Number 2, stay informed. Know what's going on in your area, what the potential threats are, and have a plan.
Preparedness is everything. Any other parting words of wisdom before we let everyone go?
No matter what category a hurricane is, even a Category 1, never underestimate its power. Respect the storm, understand it. That's how we weather those literal and figurative storms.
Love that. All right, folks, there you have it. We dove deep into the Saffir-Simpson scale, explored that whole Category 6 debate, uncovered some fascinating history. Hopefully you've walked away with a much better understanding of these incredible storms.
And most importantly, how to stay safe when they come knocking.
Couldn't agree more. Stay safe out there, everyone, and until next time, keep on diving deep.